To celebrate my divorce, my best friend, Clara, gifted me a puppy. This puppy was quite agreeable. Exceptionally so. I was exceptionally pleased. It wasn't until the next day that the fear set in. Cherishing my life, I rushed to the hospital for a checkup. And wouldn't you know it, the attending physician was none other than my ex-husband. I'm 25, a newly divorced woman. Upon hearing of my divorce, my friends orchestrated a colossal surprise. And so, this 25-year-old divorcee finally became a genuine, card-carrying divorced woman. Dawn arrived, and the man beside me was gone. Rubbing my temples, I called Clara. Hee, Aurora, how was it? Her voice chirped from the other end. How it wasn't the important thing. Who was the man last night? I hadn't seen his face in the darkness. You know him. Who? Remember how you swore you'd find a young, hot guy to soothe your soul after the divorce? Well, we contacted that one you've been chatting with, the one you said had been pursuing you online for almost a year, the one you were planning to meet in person but were hesitant about. Boom. My mind exploded. Who doesn't love playing King's Glory these days? Especially someone like me, whose real life was a mess, desperate to numb myself with games? In the days leading up to my divorce from my ex-husband, I was practically addicted to King's Glory. It was during that time that I met a puppy online. He started at the bronze rank. I thought he was a newbie, but after a few matches, I was consistently carried to victory. From then on, before the divorce, whenever I logged on, I'd beg him to play with me. The night I got the divorce papers, I got drunk. I vaguely remember crying and complaining to him about my ex. I called my ex a bastard, said he wasn't a man. This puppy was great in every way, except he never showed his face and didn't like voice chat. I only knew from his self-introduction that he was just 20 years old. I had never heard his voice. But that night, I heard his voice, low, extremely hoarse, and restrained, say, Aurora, should we give it a try? My ex-husband and I also met online, back when King's Glory wasn't a thing. We mainly used QQ. We started online dating at 20, dated online for 5 years before finally meeting in person, met twice, and then got married. So, when the puppy confessed his feelings, I, in my drunken state, sobered up instantly. So, his quiet demeanor was just him building up to this? Little punk, flirting with anyone he could. Having learned from my ex, I was scared. I took a deep breath, tapped my headset, and shouted, Hello? Hello? What did you say? I couldn't hear you, this damn internet. Then, I pretended to go offline and escaped. But from that day on, the puppy launched a relentless pursuit. He still didn't talk much, but loved to type. Sometimes, after playing King's Glory, we'd chat on WeChat. He'd send a lot of suggestive emojis, like a little person bumping into another, or a kitten stretching out its paws for a hug. Occasionally, late at night, when all the adult animals and humans start feeling restless, he'd start sending those husky, gravelly voice messages. Aurora, wanna meet? I'd reply, thanks, but no thanks. Clara's shouts brought me back to the present. I was in tears, feeling utterly dejected. Aurora, are you all right? Clara asked from the other end. I forced a bitter smile and replied, thanks to you lot, I'm doing fantastic. That's it, I'm hanging up. Without waiting for her to say anything else, I hung up. Because of my ex-husband's profession, I've always been very health conscious. I rushed to get ready, planning to go to the hospital for a checkup. Half an hour later, I arrived at the Riverside Hospital. Don't ask why I came here, it's simply the closest to my home. I stealthily made my way to the entrance of the OB/GYN department, deliberately checking the doctor's schedule posted outside. Thankfully, his name wasn't there. Soon, it was my turn. The female doctor was probably new and didn't recognize me. She called out, Aurora Stone. I'll take this one, a voice said from behind me. A hand reached out and took the referral slip. Then, a tall figure walked past me. I instantly froze. The female doctor pushed me onto the examination chair. "This is Dr. Julian Blackwood, the best in our department. Don't be put off by the fact that he's a male doctor." Underneath my mask, my lips twitched in a humorless smile. Julian Blackwood, did I not know how good his skills were? He, Julian Blackwood, my ex-husband. The female doctor left. Julian, while looking down at the computer, asked without looking up, "What seems to be the problem?" Seeing my silence, he continued, "I know you resent me, but right now, we are simply doctor and patient." This time, he looked up, his gaze as cold as ever, the standard attitude towards a stranger. Right, ex-husband equals stranger. I no longer felt like I was having a secret affair and spoke calmly, "Down there, it hurts." I was concise and to the point, and he actually understood. He suddenly turned to look at me, his gaze intense, the complex emotions in his eyes unfathomable. Then, he suddenly relaxed and said, "All right, take off your pants and lie down on the examination table with your legs spread." This? Knowing his ex-wife had slept with someone else, this was his reaction? Couldn't he at least act a little disgusted, make me feel a little better? I deliberately tried to provoke him, lying down as instructed, and said, "Yesterday, things got a little too intense. You should take a look." But I had underestimated Julian's composure. He actually walked over with his instruments and replied, "Okay." "Okay, my ass." I suddenly shouted, "Wait." Julian frowned. "It's already swollen. I need to examine it thoroughly." This was unbelievable. Before marriage, when Julian was pursuing me, he was all hormones, always wanting to take me to a hotel. But I was reserved then, thinking we were about to get married, so I told him to hold back. But after marriage, despite enduring so much before, he wouldn't touch me for 365 days a year. It was outrageous. Thinking about the emotional neglect I had suffered, I was even less willing to have any interaction with him. I pushed him away, got off the examination table, and blurted out, "I suddenly remembered I have a date with my boyfriend. I'm leaving." I rushed out of the hospital, as fast as the wind. I had just squatted down on the roadside to catch my breath when my phone rang. It was boyfriend. He sent me a voice message. "Aurora, if you need anything, feel free to call me." "Call your damn." I had just typed these words into the chat box when I instinctively looked back. Julian, along with several doctors from his department, was walking past me. He even glanced at my phone. Heh. I quickly deleted the words in the chat box and switched to voice. "Okay, I'll call for you tonight, Sheraton on People's Road, see you there." After sending it, I called a taxi, feeling like a proud peacock. As soon as I got in, I hurriedly tried to retract the voice message, but he had already listened to it. Not only did he listen, he replied instantly. "Okay, Aurora, waiting for you." I was stunned. Anxious to explain, I directly called him. The phone rang once, and he hung up. I called again, and he hung up again. Not even giving me a chance to argue? I was about to call again when he sent me a picture. You know the kind. Lightsaber transformation type. Except for the face, 8-pack abs, Adonis belt, everything was clear. Thump thump thump. Oh no, I was a little tempted. You see, my ex-husband's physique was the thing I was most satisfied with. This puppy was even more pleasing to the eye than my ex-husband. Gulp. I heard myself swallow. Then the puppy sent me another voice message. "Aurora, let me be your boyfriend. Please don't find other men, okay?" Night fell, 8:55 p.m. I arrived at the Sheraton Hotel lobby early and even put on makeup. I needed to know who had exhausted me so much last night. The attendant smiled politely at me. "Are you Ms. Aurora Stone?" "Yes, I am." Please show me your health code, scan your travel code, and then follow me. I nodded and took a deep breath. With the nervous anticipation of unveiling a grand prize, I followed the attendant to room 1808 at the Sheraton. Just as I was about to swipe the card, my phone vibrated. I received a WeChat message from the puppy. Aurora, have you arrived? Please close your eyes before entering, there's a surprise. Wow, he was quite the romantic. After opening the door, I closed my eyes. I was greeted by a refreshing fragrance and the sound of beautiful waltz music. Aurora, take 3 steps forward, then squat down and feel around. The puppy's voice was even deeper and more melodious than the waltz. I did as instructed, slowly squatting down and feeling around. I found a rectangular box. The puppy began to instruct again. Aurora, take 2 more steps forward, and squat down and feel again. This time, I felt something long and cylindrical. Finally, take 1 step and lunge to the right. Lunge? That didn't seem right. My face suddenly flushed. I was here to see his face, not to pounce like a hungry tiger. But I was already here, might as well go all the way. I steeled my heart, turned to the right, and lunged. This lunge. I lunged into nothingness. Startled, I opened my eyes. The puppy wasn't there. On the king-size bed, there was only me. And a plush toy, the kind you get as the biggest prize in a claw machine. The puppy's melodious voice was coming from the plush toy. It was pre-recorded. Aurora, do you like the surprise I prepared for you? I spent the whole afternoon setting it up, just to make you happy. I picked up the 2 things I had just felt. A box of medicine and a necklace. The necklace was from my favorite brand, the one I had always hoped my ex-husband would get for me when he finally got a clue. Now, I didn't care if he got a clue, I just wanted to smack him. While feeling both surprised and saddened, the puppy sent me a voice message. His voice was hoarse, seemingly a little tired. I'm sorry, Aurora, I promised to meet you at the hotel at 9, to have a big meal together, to use the telescope I brought to look at the stars, but... Cough, get to the point. But I really have something I can't get away from right now. By the way, Aurora, are you still in pain? Me? I figured, since it was the first time for both of us, you might be in pain too. I bought you some medicine. I was going to help you apply it, but, you should use it later. I glanced at the medicine thrown on the bed, the label stating it was for reducing swelling and pain. Help me apply it? And the first time? Who was he kidding? But I didn't expose him. Out of a desire to see his face, I casually asked him what time he could arrive. He replied, 12:15 a.m. Wow, just like my ex-husband, quite the detail-oriented type. All right, I'll wait. I'll wait on the bed. And then? I fell asleep instantly. When I woke up again, someone was sleeping beside me, breathing shallowly. My heart started pounding, and I fumbled for my phone on the bedside table, about to turn on the screen. The person next to me suddenly woke up, grabbed my hand, and gently pressed himself against me. Then, he started kissing me tenderly. I had just woken up. And the speed was already this fast? I pushed him away with all my might, wanting to see his face, but he only kissed me more passionately. I softened. The phone slipped from my hand. With a clatter, the screen lit up. He was probably startled and stopped kissing me. I wanted to take the opportunity to see his face. But his actions were faster than my gaze. Before I could react, he had slid off the bed, quickly pulled a mask out of his pocket, and put it on. Then, with a long arm, he grabbed a baseball cap from the bedside table and put it on. Me? 1 second he was kissing me passionately, the next he was playing mysterious. Was this guy seriously ill? Won't you let me see? No, Aurora, I've had an allergic reaction on my face recently, it's a bit ugly. Then take off the hat. I haven't washed my hair. I slid off the bed, squatted beside him, and stared intently at his almost completely covered profile. It's okay, I don't mind if you're dirty. I do. Take it off. I suddenly narrowed my eyes, staring at him intently. But his long, slender fingers pressed down on the brim of his baseball cap, his head lowering further. Don't be like this, Aurora. It's our first meeting, I want to give you a good impression. I was itching now. I desperately wanted to see his face. I even brought out the cooing act I used to use on my ex-husband. But I just want to see the god's true face. The air stilled. I was so embarrassed I could have dug a hole in the Sheraton with my toes. Just as I was thinking of saying something, a swallowing sound came, and he seemed to finally make up his mind. All right, Aurora, wait a moment, I'll wash up and then show you. Okay. I watched him, over 6 feet tall, disappear into the bathroom. For a moment, I thought of my ex-husband. See, the puppy wasn't so unattached to me. Why couldn't he be like this? The sound of running water brought me back to my senses. I just remembered something and bent down to pick up my phone. Clara's call came at that moment. As soon as I pressed the answer button, her voice exploded in my ear. Aurora, something terrible has happened. Clara's voice was more frantic than I'd ever heard it, making me frown. I'd known her for so long and had never heard her speak in such a tone. I couldn't help but become serious, pressing her on what was wrong. It's. She couldn't get it out, and the more she hesitated, the more worried I became. I covered the phone, glanced at the brightly lit bathroom, and walked to the balcony to continue questioning her. Hurry up and tell me, did you get pregnant with your boyfriend without protection? No. Are your parents fighting? Are they going to kick you out? Or did you take out an online loan, and they're going to expose your little videos? Go to hell. I don't have any little videos. It's that. That what? Can you just spit it out and stop wasting my time? I have important things to do. I still needed to see the puppy's face. But Clara's next words nearly made me drop my phone. She said, What? Julian is dying? I couldn't help but shout. Then, I heard a thud from the bathroom, as if the puppy had fallen. Logic told me that cold-faced bastard's life or death was none of my business. I should have pushed open the bathroom door and admired the puppy's unclothed, perfect physique and handsome face. But I couldn't help but tremble, pretending to be calm, and replied. What kind of joke is that late at night? Haven't you heard that a bad penny always turns up? If he really died, I'd set off fireworks for 3 days to celebrate. Tell me, did he suddenly get into a car accident, or was he diagnosed with cancer? Clara seemed to be silent for a long time, then sighed and spoke in an extremely serious tone. Aurora, this was supposed to be kept from you. But I really can't stand it anymore. You know, my aunt also works at that hospital. She said Julian suddenly had acute gastric bleeding during his rounds this afternoon. His condition was extremely critical. My aunt said it was likely stomach cancer. It can't be that accurate. Aurora, it's true. The scary thing is that he refused to be examined afterward and just left. My aunt said his condition is still very dangerous, but he's gone missing, and his phone is turned off. Call the police. Missing for less than 24 hours. Anyway, I think after being married to him, maybe you can persuade him. He needs to get treatment, right? Think about it, if he really dies of stomach cancer, no matter how well you're doing, he won't be around to be jealous. I thought of that dead man's indifferent reaction to hearing about my hookup earlier, and I couldn't help but feel a bit competitive. Clara was right. But it was a bit strange, how could the cold, aloof guy from earlier have such a major incident in the afternoon? Forget it, saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda. I think I know where he is. Thinking of this, I walked back to the bathroom, knocked on the door, and said somewhat awkwardly, something urgent has come up. Yes, Aurora, go ahead. How about, we reschedule? Thinking that the puppy's true face was so close, yet I was delayed by that bastard ex-husband, I couldn't help but reach out and quietly try to turn the doorknob, even if it was just for a quick peek before I left. But the door was locked. The little guy was quite alert. At this moment, the puppy replied, "Okay, I'll be waiting for your message anytime." I didn't have time to linger, and upon hearing this response, I turned and left the hotel. Not long after, I found myself standing before an apartment. This was Julian's premarital residence. Every detail of the interior design was a testament to his dedication. When we were dating, he once told me that, having lost his parents at a young age, he was accustomed to solitude. Before I came along, whenever he felt down, he'd sit alone on the balcony, letting the cold wind blow until dawn. Because this apartment was premarital property, and because it held too many memories of us, after the divorce, I didn't even think twice before renting a place outside and moving out without hesitation. I tentatively entered the password for the door lock. Click. The door opened. After all this time, his password was still the date we met in person? I stepped inside and turned on the lights. The room, which I remembered as meticulously tidy, remained unchanged. I instinctively looked around, but Julian was nowhere to be seen. Instead, something hanging on the wall of the master bedroom shocked me. It was our shattered wedding photo. I had smashed this huge wedding photo in a fit of anger before I decided to divorce Julian. I remember dragging it to the dumpster downstairs and throwing it away. When did that guy retrieve it? He was a strange one. He didn't cherish me when I was around, and now that I was gone, he put up a broken photo frame to reminisce? Of course, I couldn't rule out the possibility that he hung it on the wall to silently admire his past achievements, or, like a psychopath, to appreciate the shattered beauty of his ex-wife. Just as I was lost in thought, I heard footsteps behind me. Julian's voice was a bit cold. "Aurora, why are you here?" Startled, I turned around. He was holding a bag containing some medical supplies. What puzzled me was that his hairline was slightly damp, and his breathing wasn't entirely steady. Could he have gone for a run in the middle of the night and bought some medicine along the way? I frowned, about to say something, but he turned and walked to the kitchen, pouring me a glass of water. "Since you're here, would you like to sit down for a while?" Remembering my purpose, I didn't take the glass he offered. Instead, I followed him to the sofa and sat down. Looking at his noticeably pale face and dry lips, I said, "I heard you had a gastric hemorrhage this afternoon?" Your voice, sounds a little gleeful?" I quickly covered my mouth, pretending to hide my joy. "Yes, you should know, I've been hoping you'd drop dead." He gave a cool smile. "Then you might be disappointed. I just haven't been resting well lately. It's a minor gastric hemorrhage. I took some medicine, and a few days of rest will do." I provoked him. "Are you sure? What if it's stomach cancer?" He suddenly fell silent for a long time, staring at my face for ages. Just as I was starting to feel uncomfortable under his gaze, he suddenly asked, his tone floating and strangely cold, "Aurora, you still love me, don't you?" My reaction was to stand up from the sofa immediately. "What are you talking about? We've come this far, isn't it superficial to talk about love? Julian, let me tell you, if you're sick, get treatment. Early." I remember someone boasting to me when we were dating that he wanted to be a good doctor for the rest of his life. What's this? Are you avoiding treatment because you're a doctor yourself? He also stood up from the sofa. His height advantage allowed him to look down at me. His thin lips moved, as if he was about to say something. And I felt a moment of awkwardness, feeling that my sudden appearance tonight was a bit self-deprecating. I turned to leave, but he suddenly pulled me into his arms from behind. He held me tightly, and I couldn't break free. His usually cold tone, for the first time, had a slight tremor, as he asked me, word by word, "Isn't it true? You heard I was sick, and you couldn't even bother with the person you were supposed to meet tonight?" Aurora, I was stunned. How did you know I had a date tonight? He paused for a moment. You said it yourself this morning, remember? Oh, I remembered. But his reminder made me even angrier. Because of this guy, I didn't get to see the puppy's face. Just one step away. I forcefully pushed Julian away. He clearly hadn't expected such a strong reaction from me. After a moment of surprise, his slightly expressive face returned to its usual calm demeanor. Before leaving, I dropped one last sentence. Anyway, it's your decision. Whether you live or die is none of my business. I'm so annoyed. I left without a backward glance, completely unaware of the struggle, pain, and hesitation that flashed in Julian's eyes as he watched my retreating figure. And that night, I, who had created countless unfinished stories online, finally decided to show some love to my insomnia buddy. I locked myself in my rented apartment study, furiously typing away at the computer, filling in the gaps of all the long and short novels I had started over the years. At dawn, I stopped. My somewhat crazed mind finally calmed down. Just then, I heard a notification from my phone. I looked down and realized that, in just one night, the puppy had sent me countless voice messages and texts. I clicked on the last one. Aurora, I've been waiting for you all night. Why didn't you log on to King's Glory? I clicked on the previous ones. Basically, starting from around 10 o'clock last night, he would send me a message every 10 minutes or so, asking if I had finished my business, if I had gotten home, if I was playing the game today, that he was waiting for me, and so on. I quickly opened the voice recording function on WeChat, about to reply to his message, when I suddenly noticed something was off. The times the puppy sent me messages were almost identical to the time I left my ex-husband's place. I remembered that last night, when I left Julian's apartment, I had glanced at my phone. It was 10:15 p.m. I called Aditi, and as soon as I got in, my phone froze and shut down. To confirm my suspicions, I quickly checked the order time on the ride-hailing app. It was indeed around 10 o'clock. Was the puppy messaging me at that time a coincidence, or was I overthinking it? I then checked the time Didi dropped me off, and it was also very close to the time the puppy asked if I had gotten home. Buzz. My mind went into overdrive. Could it be that all this time, the big brother and master I thought I knew online? He was actually a stalker? I abruptly stood up from my chair, pacing around the room while organizing my thoughts. Suddenly, I slapped my forehead, remembering the other parties involved in this case. I quickly grabbed my phone and started a Four Musketeers voice conference. Beatrice and Chloe joined quickly. There was a delay with Clara, and some background noise. I vaguely heard her talking to someone. Sigh, you can't just fleece one sheep, can you? Why didn't you ask? Oh? Aurora, why are you starting a voice conference so early in the morning? Suddenly, her side became pin-drop silent. Beatrice and Chloe also remained eerily quiet. I casually asked, you just... Ah? Huh. It's my dad. He had a fight with my mom last night, some misunderstanding. My mom went back to my grandma's place and isn't answering his calls, so my dad came to me to contact my mom. I immediately felt a little embarrassed, disturbing Clara's important business so early in the morning. I was about to speak when Beatrice suddenly interjected, Aurora, I have a very important morning meeting today. Can we get straight to the point? Chloe also said, yeah, I'm so sleepy. Aurora, when are you going to update that novel you wrote? Don't drag me into your unfinished stories next time. The biggest regret of my life is being your reader. The topic was getting more and more off track, so I quickly said, I think I know the puppy's real identity. Another eerie silence. Clara's voice sounded a bit shaky. What identity? Her question only fueled my indignation. I narrowed my eyes and said in a serious tone, he might be. Chloe said in exasperation, see, I told you, even though she's not the brightest, she shouldn't have been kept. Beatrice suddenly snapped, cutting Chloe off. Let Aurora finish. I had originally wanted to ask the three of them about the puppy's appearance, because if he was a stalker, I should have some impression of him being around me. But Chloe and Beatrice's reactions were completely unexpected. I was stunned. My intuition, honed by years of friendship, told me that the three of them were hiding something from me. I suddenly felt the pain of being excluded by my best friends, a feeling comparable to when Julian and I broke up. My nose twitched, and I finally let out a helpless laugh. Never mind, I won't say it. I'll deal with it myself. Another silence from the three of them. Clara's voice seemed to be on the verge of tears. Aurora. I quietly exited the voice conference and, with a final sigh, changed the name of our Four Musketeers group to Plastic Sisterhood. Then, I pulled up my chat with the puppy and scrolled through all our conversations since we met. I realized that every time he initiated contact with me, the timing was perfect. I inexplicably thought of the shattered wedding photo hanging in Julian's bedroom. The sweat on his hairline. His furtive glances at my phone when I was flirting with the puppy. Finally, my finger stopped on the lightsaber transformation photo the puppy sent me yesterday. I vaguely remembered that once, while stroking Julian's lean waist, I had said, "It would be amazing if you had six-pack abs." I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, I sent the puppy a voice message. "Let's break up," I said. He didn't reply for a full 10 minutes, then typed, "Why, Aurora? So sudden. Did I do something wrong?" I didn't reply. He sent another message, You don't want to see my face anymore?" I blocked the puppy and sent Julian a waving hand emoji. After doing all this, I quickly turned off my phone. Who cared who the damn puppy was? Just a moment ago, I had gone crazy, thinking that Julian still had feelings for me and had turned my best friends against me to play a trick on me. But how could that be possible? Clara and Chloe might be easily bought with a few candies. But Beatrice was a high-level executive with an annual salary of nearly $1 million, and she was always taciturn and extremely loyal. Unless absolutely necessary, she wouldn't deceive me. As for the little secret I sensed between them, maybe I was just overthinking it after staying up all night. And their actions of throwing me to a stranger, the puppy, maybe, it was just simple concern gone wrong? I looked at the laptop on the table, the one I used for writing. The sticker on it was a picture of Julian and me holding hands. It was time to truly let go. I thought. I made myself a sumptuous breakfast, and after eating my fill, I thoroughly cleaned the room. Then I buried my head and slept. When I woke up again, it was already past 9 at night. I was preparing to adjust my state and return to the glorious path of writing to make big money when I heard a commotion at my front door. Someone was banging on my door. Frowning, I shuffled to the door in my slippers and looked through the peephole. 2 people in police uniforms instantly scared away the remnants of my sleepiness. I hurriedly opened the door. Only then did I realize that there were more than just 2 police officers outside. My ex-husband, my best friends, were all there. One police officer said, "Why didn't you open the door earlier? Why was your phone turned off when your friends called you?" I was trembling with fear, and before I could reply, Clara rushed over and hugged me, crying, "Aurora, please don't do anything foolish." Julian stood behind Clara, looking at me, his expression unreadable. Beatrice turned around and, while thanking the police, efficiently handled the follow-up matters. While the police were taking my statement, I finally understood what had happened. They hadn't been able to reach me all day yesterday, so they called the police. When I woke up earlier, the police had almost broken down my door with them. Finally, after the police left, Beatrice looked at Julian and me seriously, frowning at him. "Since it's come to this, I think some things should be said, don't you?" Clara and Chloe exchanged glances. The former tried to sneak away, but the latter blocked her with outstretched arms. I looked at Julian, then at Clara and Chloe, and finally, my gaze stopped on Beatrice. Beatrice said, "Don't look at me, look at them. I'm just an informed party." I smiled helplessly, sighed, and turned to walk to the sofa. Chloe shouted from behind me, "Aurora, I'm sorry, we lied to you." "Clara, I was, by your ex-husband," I said, sitting on the sofa and looking at the people at the door, coldly reminding her, "He's my ex-husband." Clara was stunned, clearly not expecting this reaction from me. Julian's cool gaze slowly shifted to my face, meeting my eyes. His handsome lips moved, but he couldn't seem to smile. Even the usually calm and collected Beatrice was a little skeptical. "You." I spread my hands, looking utterly helpless, but my words were a bit sharp. "Tell me, what benefits did this guy promise you? Was it worth it to conspire with him against me? And you?" I looked at Julian, more calm and clear-headed than ever before, hurting me on one hand, and pretending to be a player on the other. Watching me being played like a fool, you were quite happy and smug when I showed off that I had found someone else, huh? Julian clenched his fists, his gaze fixed on me, finally slowly moving away. Chloe couldn't stand it anymore. She looked at Julian and me as if she were watching a tragic love story in a novel, stomped her foot, and said, "Aurora, you've misunderstood him. Do you know that he—" "I'm sorry," Julian's hoarse voice suddenly came. He looked back at me, finally smiling, but his smile was almost weak and resigned. "Our marriage. I owe you an—" "I'm sorry." I waved my hand. "Forget it, I forgive you. As for you." I looked at my best friends. "I don't want to know the reason why you colluded with him. If you want me to forgive you, it's simple. However, you brought his fake identity to me, make him disappear the same way now. As for the past, what's done is done." Clara and Chloe's faces were already extremely uncomfortable. Beatrice looked at Julian. Julian took a deep breath, smiled even wider, and said, "Then I'll go. Take care." He turned around, paused for a long time. Finally, without looking back, he strode away. "My name is Julian Blackwood, and this is the third day since my wife asked for a divorce. My therapist reminded me, your condition is very serious. Without intervention and treatment, there's basically no chance of recovery." The so-called intervention involved continuous nerve-soothing medication and countless psychological counseling sessions. Every time I thought about this, I felt that the future held no hope. And all of this stemmed from my family background. My father died early, and my mother died from postpartum hemorrhage after giving birth to my younger brother. I will never forget that day. I, only 3 years old, held onto the operating table and ran to the emergency room, desperately shouting for my mother not to leave me. But she still left the moment she was pushed into the emergency room. Later, I studied hard and worked tirelessly to become the youngest and most promising doctor in the OB/GYN department. I was determined to be an outstanding doctor. But the day before I got my marriage certificate with my wife, the patient I had been treating, who had previously smiled at me and given me a thumbs up, still passed away in front of me due to acute postpartum hemorrhage shortly after entering the delivery room. At that moment, I realized my own powerlessness, and it deeply awakened my childhood memories. I went home, and the more my wife smiled at me lovingly, the more I feared that being close to her would make her pregnant. At first, I was just afraid to touch her. Later, I became so severe that I couldn't even face her. Until she asked for a divorce. I knew she was unwilling. She wanted to know why I was so different before and after marriage. But I didn't dare to say it. I really didn't dare. She loved me so much. If I told her, she would wait for me to recover. But what if I could never recover? How long could a sexless marriage last? I wasn't sure. So I just coldly replied with a simple "okay." She turned and went to the study. I desperately studied academic materials, numbing myself with work. But I still couldn't let go. That little firecracker, she wouldn't be happy. So, I peeked at her phone and registered a King's Glory alt account. In the game, it was great. I could quietly accompany her, listen to her scold me, and not feel sad, but instead, very happy. But I was also very bad. I was afraid that she would forget me. The last time I saw my therapist, I told him this secret. The doctor's reaction was first to frown, and then he told me very sternly that this behavior of mine could lead to a split personality. I thought, he might be like me, not a very qualified doctor. I didn't know if playing two roles would lead to a split personality. I only knew that without her, I couldn't go on. This was evident from the fact that when she first left, I drank heavily every day and worked overtime, causing myself a stomach bleed. So, I continued to play her big brother. Until, her best friend, Clara, drunk and cursing me, called me in the middle of the night. She said, "Julian Blackwood, you scumbag. My Aurora is such a good girl, and you hurt her so badly. You motherfucker, if you can't have sex, you should have said so earlier. You made my baby doubt herself, doubt her." Hiccup. She also said she'd casually find a man to heal. She. Where is she? Why the hell should I tell you? So you can come and continue to torment my baby? I love her, I heard myself say. Countless times, I had wanted to shout this to her. But I was never good at expressing myself. If Clara hadn't been so drunk, I don't think I would have been able to say it. On the other end, there were crashing sounds, as if several people had fallen. Finally, it was Beatrice who took the phone. Even drunk, she seemed calmer than the others. She said, "You little shit, do you know what you're saying?" I was silent, and finally, I just asked for Aurora's address again. Beatrice sneered, "Even if you gave 100 reasons, Aurora and I would never forgive you. We'd just beat you up every time we saw you." I repeatedly stroked the shattered wedding photo that my little sweetheart had trampled on and that I had rehung on the wall, and said, "I'm sick. I want to try, to see if this risky approach can bring us back together." That night, I frantically embraced my love. She was so small in my arms, repeating, "Julian Blackwood, you bastard," over and over. I told her, "I'm someone else." She oat, and drunkenly stroked my face, lightly scolding, "You look quite like that bastard, little guy. Do you think I'm pretty?" I answered, "Pretty," and she tilted her neck and kissed me. With her eyes closed, it seemed as if she thought I was myself. After that, I carefully concealed all traces of myself as Julian. But, hearing her boast about having someone else, I still felt sad. She didn't love me anymore, did she? At the same time, I couldn't help but use the puppy's identity to try to become the person she liked, to grasp her every moment of happiness or unhappiness. This afternoon, on a whim, I prepared to meet her. After a morning of anxiety, I took time off from work and carefully decorated the room with some small surprises. I thought, if she liked it, when she saw my face, would she be less angry? But before the appointment, I still chickened out. In those 10 minutes of hesitation, my director called me to see a patient. After being busy, I had another acute gastric hemorrhage. When I arrived at the hotel, my little sweetheart was already asleep. She was still curled up in the blanket like a little ball. I couldn't help but sleep beside her, hugging her and the blanket, just like when we were dating. This time I was going to confess. But I still underestimated my cowardice. I hid in the bathroom and sent a distress text to Clara. Finally, she told Aurora, "Julian is dying." She stood me up to go see me. But I was very happy. The truth came out so quickly. Before I could prepare myself, that little sweetheart guessed everything. I finally agreed with the therapist's words, "Life is not a play. If you get used to acting, maybe another abyss is waiting for you." When I entered her home, I found that the last trace of us had been completely cleaned up by her. She said, "I hope you disappear." I knew her temper. When she said something like that, it meant she had truly let go. Whether it was me, Julian, or someone else. As Julian, from this moment on, she really didn't want me anymore. As someone else. Maybe before I even successfully entered her heart, I was already completely out of the game. When I turned to leave, I cried. She might never know how I managed to take those steps away. This time, Aurora was truly gone from my life. I was dazed every day, not knowing what to do. On the surface, I seemed to be working and living seriously, but only I knew that I had lost myself. Every night, I would pretend to be someone else, waiting for her, who would never come online again. I don't know how much time passed. Beatrice texted me, "Aurora is leaving, never to return." I held the phone and looked at it for a long time. Aurora didn't belong to this city in the first place. She came to this city to meet me. It just so happened that she had a few friends here, and she had already regarded this place as her second home. Seeing that I didn't reply, Beatrice called. I wasn't surprised at all. Beatrice was the calmest of the group, seemingly the most difficult to talk to, but in reality, she valued relationships the most. Beatrice said, "It's 8:30 a.m. now. I'm only giving you 1 hour. If you give up, you'll be on all of our blacklists. Don't think you'll have one last chance." I suddenly stood up, crushing the pen in my hand. Finally, I took a deep breath, hurriedly asked the director for leave, and rushed towards the airport. End. Epilogue. I'm Aurora Stone. More than 8 months ago, I left my ex-husband's city and returned to my hometown to laze around. My mother looked at my bulging belly, sighing and speechless, muttering about my irrationality while feeding me fruit. My dad, an intellectual, adjusted his glasses and asked me, "Are you sure? The child will only have one mother?" I nodded vaguely while continuing to browse information on booking a postpartum center. My parents exchanged a very subtle look, and then my dad said, "I met Julian yesterday. He quit his good job and is coming to our city to develop his career." I owed and didn't respond. In fact, over the past 8 months, I often heard about Julian from my parents. The day I returned to my hometown, I found out I was pregnant. And that night, Julian chased after me from his city. It was pouring rain that night. I had just vomited in the bathroom when he, soaking wet, knocked on my door. My parents only knew that we were divorced, but they didn't know why. While my mother hesitated, unsure whether to let him in, I coldly gave him one word. Scram. Choosing to forget didn't mean I was heartless. After being played like a fool by him, my heart, which had once beat for him, was now full of bloody holes. Julian's deep gaze was fixed on me, hoarsely saying, "Aurora, please give me another chance." I walked straight to the door, pushed him out with force, and slammed the door shut. That night, Julian stood downstairs, drenched in the rain all night long. That night, my parents were baffled. Why was I, usually so good-tempered, being so heartless? After that, Julian often flew back and forth between the two cities. He even bought an apartment in my housing complex. More precisely, across the hall from my apartment. I couldn't interfere with his freedom, so I could only try to treat him as heir. But he often managed to have chance encounters with me. Later, I stopped going out. But how did he know I was pregnant? Every few days, he'd send supplements through my parents, and my friends in another city would send truckloads of maternity and baby supplies to my house. Seeing that I was annoyed, my mother suggested, "If you really don't want to be with him, how about finding someone else?" I patted my belly helplessly. Who would accept a buy one get one free deal? But then, I suddenly had an idea. I contacted a childhood friend online, asking him to pretend to be the taker. My friend, for a thank you of 2,000, readily agreed. But unexpectedly, within 2 days, Julian had a physical altercation with him. I will never forget the look in Julian's eyes, red like he was about to cry, when I bailed him and my friend out of the police station. He pinned me against the wall, cupped my face, kissed me over and over, and said he was sorry. He asked if I loved my friend, and I said, "I do." Julian's tears fell into my neck. After that, I didn't see him for a long time. I only occasionally received news about him from my parents. Bringing my thoughts back, I finally chose a postpartum center and placed an order for 2 weeks later. At this point, my due date was less than 2 weeks away. I told myself in my heart, Aurora Stone, forget the last look he gave you. You can take care of the baby just fine on your own. But just as I stood up, a warm gush suddenly flowed from below. My face changed slightly. Oh no, my water broke. My parents were immediately anxious. My mother hurriedly told me to lie down, and my father went to call 120. But during the pandemic, 120 dispatches weren't convenient, and I hadn't prepared a nucleic acid test. My mother started crying. My dad said, don't worry, don't worry. Julian said he'd be back today. I'll call him. Yes, I'll call him right away. Isn't he the head of the OB/GYN department? I was lying on the bed, my face pale with pain. Even though I didn't want to see that person again, I knew very well that the only one who could help me right now was probably him. Soon, there was a pounding on my door. Julian entered, covered in sweat, his face even paler than mine. My car is downstairs. I'll carry you down. Auntie, uncle, please grab the delivery bag, documents, and all her pregnancy checkup results. My parents finally seemed to have a backbone, hurrying to prepare. I nestled in Julian's arms, not daring to move. The doctor had said during the checkup that my amniotic fluid was low, and now that I was lying down and the fluid was still gushing, I was really afraid the baby would be deprived of oxygen. It was also at this time that I clearly felt Julian's arms trembling as he held me. Remembering what my friends had told me, I was afraid he'd have a breakdown, so I quickly tried to reassure him, I'm fine, don't be nervous. Julian pressed his lips together tightly, carrying me quickly to the elevator, straight to his car parked in the basement. My parents, carrying large and small bags, ran behind us, looking like a group of people going to war. It was the first time I'd been in Julian's new car. The 7-seater was very spacious. When Julian placed me in the back seat, I was already in so much pain that I couldn't speak. All the way, he drove the car very fast. After arriving at the hospital, we waited in the car for the nucleic acid test results. After all the commotion, I was admitted to the hospital several hours later. My mother fed me chocolate, my father gave me juice, and Julian held my hand, trembling even more. Dr. Blackwood, we plan to give your wife some more oxytocin. The patient's water has been broken for a long time. Any longer, and it will be very unfavorable. It was only after I was admitted that I learned Julian had quit his original job and found a new one at the OB/GYN hospital near my home. Julian nodded. I was given more oxytocin. And after all this pain, my cervix had only dilated 1 centimeter. I didn't have the strength to correct the doctor's "your wife" reference. Beep. The fetal heart rate monitor suddenly sounded an alarm. Julian glanced at it, and his face turned ashen. The doctor next to him immediately shouted, no, the baby may be deprived of oxygen soon. It's best to prepare for a C-section now, but all the doctors are scheduled for surgery today. The fastest. I'll do it. Let him do it. Julian and I spoke at the same time. I didn't know how much courage it took for Julian to say that. Perhaps it was the urgency of his beloved woman and the impending birth of his child that forced him to take this step. He looked very nervous. And I was even more nervous than him. I wanted to tell him, when he looked worried, that I was fine and the baby would be fine too. But for the C-section, I was given anesthesia, and Julian had to prepare for the surgery. Before falling asleep, I couldn't speak to him. I was constantly uneasy. Worried about the baby, and worried about him. When I woke up, only my mother was beside the bed. I tried to sit up with all my might, pulling at the incision, and gasped in pain, asking anxiously, "Where's the baby?" My voice was hoarse when I asked these 3 words. My mother quickly told me to lie down and told me the baby was fine, just in an incubator because of premature birth. I breathed a sigh of relief, hesitated for a long time, and then asked, "Where's Julian?" Is he okay? He's not okay. My mother sighed. I panicked a little. Normally, I should have woken up 1 to 2 hours after the anesthesia. I just glanced at the phone on the bedside table. 5 hours had passed since I entered the operating room until I woke up. How agonizing those 5 hours must have been for Julian. He wouldn't be in trouble, would he? My mother continued, he worked so hard to save you both, and after seeing the baby, he stayed by your bedside. But remembering that you always told him to. Scram, when he saw your eyelids moving and you were about to wake up, he ran away. Do you think he's pathetic? But no matter how pathetic he is, he deserves it. I lay on the bed, not knowing if it was the pain from the incision or heartache, and didn't speak for a long time. In the silence, my mother suddenly said, which couple doesn't argue? But some couples, like your father and me, make up in a day. And for some couples, it takes a whole year, or even more, to make up from an argument. I pondered my mother's words and picked up my phone, but in the end, I didn't dial that familiar number. Just 1 year, that's letting him off easy. But women are really strange. Once, I thought, Julian cheated me so badly, I wouldn't let him off the hook for 3 to 5 years. But seeing him holding our daughter, Shin, like a proud papa, seeing him carefully tentatively calling me Aurora. I couldn't help but ask him, Dr. Blackwood, do you want to remarry? Before the baby was registered, Julian and I remarried. His reaction when he got the marriage certificate was something I hadn't expected. He, a grown man, cried, and hugged me and cried. At that moment, something touched my heart. I had overcome my past shadows and taken so many steps forward. I couldn't always stay stagnant. I reached out and patted his back, gently saying, Husband, the country has opened up the 3-child policy. We should work hard to find more companions for Shin. He held me even tighter, his whole body trembling even more. After a long time, he calmed down and said, Yes, wife, whatever you say. There's still a long life ahead. Having an obedient husband isn't bad.